All right, on to Screwtape Letters, letter 6. This one is a little bit longer. There's a lot of things that are happening in this letter. So in letter 5, we found out that the war has begun, and so now Screwtape is instructing Wormwood on how to proceed with the patient. So there's a lot of unknown in his life. He's not sure if he's going to be called up to service or not, and so Screwtape is trying to take advantage of that uncertainty. So he begins by kind of drawing a distinction here. So God wants us to be focused on what we do, right? He says the enemy wants men to be concerned with what they do. Our business is to keep them thinking about what will happen to them. So there's kind of like this dual goal here from God's camp and then from the demon's camp. So God wants us to be focused on what we do, and this means we should accept with patience God's will in our present sufferings. So if I'm focused on what I need to do each day, I'm going to say today I need to work on schoolwork, and right now I need to do the dishes, and then I need to sweep the floors, right? So I'm focusing on what I need to do right now and accepting with patience God's will in our present sufferings. Demons want us to focus on what will happen to us. So instead of on the things that we can control, things that we can do, to focus on what's going to happen next, right? And, an example being coronavirus. Are we going to go back to school in 2 weeks? What's going to happen to us? Is this going to affect my summer plans? Is this going to affect my Easter trip? What's going to happen? So focusing not on the things I can control and do right now, but focusing on this fear of what might happen. They want to keep us fearful of the things that might happen to us. We're not sure yet. And so, for this patient, there's this war that just broke out. What's going to happen? Am I going to go to service? Am I going to fight in the war? Am I going to stay home? What's going to happen to my mom? What's going to happen to my friends? So fearful of the things that might happen instead of saying, right now, this is what I'm called to do. Demons want us to be resigned to all potential sufferings and to focus on fear itself. So obviously, if we think about it, for the patient, he cannot go to war and stay home. Both of those things cannot happen to him. But demons want us to focus on and try to say, this is God's will, that you need to accept that both of these things will happen or might happen, instead of God's actual which is saying, right now I need to accept the things that are happening to me at this moment and to surrender to him this suffering itself, the fear itself. And so demons, instead of wanting us to surrender that to God, is to focus on that thing as well. He talks also about how in the patient, just like in all of us, there's going to be some malice and some benevolence, right? So some evil malice. Benevolence is goodness or good-heartedness. And he said the goal is to direct the malice of the patient to his immediate neighbor, to the people that he sees every day, and to thrust his benevolence out to the remote circumferences to people he does not know. The malice thus becomes wholly real, and the benevolence largely imaginary, right? So he's talking about the Germans. There's no good of inflaming his hatred of the Germans, but at the same time, he's starting to be more loving to his family and mom and friends and whatnot. So to kind of flip those things. He also mentions this spiritual rule, which is kind of a big part of it, and I understand it can be kind of confusing, so we'll take a minute to look at the demon's quote-unquote spiritual law. So first of all, he says, this is a direct quote from the book, in all activities of mind which favor our cause, read here evil, sin, encourage the patient to be unself-conscious and to concentrate on the object itself. So if we're doing something evil, if there's this desire in our heart to sin or to fall short, he doesn't want us to think about ourselves or think about what we're doing, but to focus on the object. It's an example, right? We're cooped up in this house together. If Mr. West is driving me crazy, the demons would want me to stay focused on what Mr. West is doing, so outside of me, the object itself, that annoyance or that action that annoys me, and not about my choices, saying that I am choosing to give into this frustration. I am holding on this anger and aggression. What am I doing to, that's adding to this sinfulness? Is he doing it on purpose? Because if he's not, then I've created what I say would be a sin for him, and focusing on that annoyance and kind of thrusting it upon him that he's doing it himself. And so to annoy me, when that might not necessarily be the case. And so again, if it's something that's favorable to the enemy, don't think about yourself, just think about the object itself. If I see, a guy and I think he's attractive and I start lusting after him, the demons want me to say, don't realize I'm entering into lust, but just focus on that object itself. Focus on the way that person looks. So for any of the sins, again, don't think about yourself, don't think about what you're doing, think about that object. In matters unfavorable and all activities favorable to the enemy or unfavorable to the demons, bend his mind back on itself. So do the opposite thing if it's something that has to do with God. So for example, if I want to grow in charity, the demons would want me to stay focused on myself, on my own feelings of charity, and not on the outward action of charity, right? So if I'm saying, oh, I just want to be more charitable, and I feel really charitable in my heart, I feel like a really charitable person, but I do not, do acts of service for Mr. West, then I'm focusing on myself and not on the actions. And so it's flipped if it's something that has to do that's good, right? If I want to pray, focus on that you feel like you're praying. Don't actually let them pray, just make them feel like, oh, I'm really close to God right now, and we're just in sync right now and we're best friends. But keep that person from actually praying, keep that person from actually being kind and virtuous. So this is what they would call their spiritual law. The last thing he mentions is he says to think about the person as these concentric circles. And I'm sorry the font is kind of low on here or hard to see. It was kind of challenging for me to make this grid, but I did it. So if we are a series of concentric circles, the will is our innermost circle. The intellect comes next, and fantasy being this outside of the circle. So he says, you can hardly hope at once to exclude from all circles everything that smells of the enemy, everything that smells of God, but you must keep on shoving all the virtues outward till they are finally located in the circle of fantasy, right? So that if I am trying to be charitable, if I'm trying to be patient, if I'm trying to be hopeful and full of faith, to push those into just our imaginations, just into our minds, and into our fantasy, the things that we think about, and not into what I'm actually willing or choosing to do, not as virtues of the mind that I'm thinking about what they are, but push them into this fantasy realm. It says, and all the desirable qualities inward toward the will. So the sins being the things that I'm choosing to do. It is only insofar as they reach the will and are there embodied in habits that the virtues are really fatal to us. So he says, right, if I think that patience if it's in my fantasy circle, and I think that patience means that I, am willing to lie in bed all morning and waiting for Mr. West to make me breakfast and bring me coffee in bed. And that's what patience really is. If I'm pushing that into this realm of fantasy, and that's how I'm defining it, the demons aren't worried about that because that's not real patience, right? That's, entitlement and selfishness. Real patience, right, would be saying that, I don't know what's going to happen with our school year, but I'm going to choose to be patient, and in my will, I'm not going to stress, I'm not going to freak out about it. I'm going to wait resigned to whatever God wants for me this year, whatever God wants for us this year. And so keeping those, again, so do we see that distinction? It's not actually a virtue. If we think that it's something that it's not, and it's in this fantasy realm, the demons aren't worried about that. And he says they actually make them funny when they go down to hell, that oh, but I'm a really patient person. How come I'm in hell? Oh, because that wasn't actually patience, right? So they're not concerned with fake virtue. They're just concerned with real virtue, and when those things come into our will. So I hope this was helpful. I am also going to post a link. There's this really cool C.S. Lewis doodle. I'm actually going to exit out of here and pull it up for you really quickly on letter 6. And I'm going to play it just a little bit for you because it's like an audio drama and they doodle and it's really cool. So they kind of make a story around the text.
John!
Oh, hello, Mum. Oh, dear, you haven't been sitting there the whole time, have you?
Well, I didn't know what else to do. What did they say?
Well, they didn't say much at all, actually.
Well, they must have told you something.
Nothing helpful, I'm afraid. My age and profession make it possible, but not certain, that I will be called up for military service.
Oh. When will you know?
I haven't the foggiest. You are now as informed as I. About that tea.
Come into the kitchen. Surely they must have said something.
This is your progress report, Wormwood. That he may be called to military service, or he may not.
Yes, Uncle. I had hoped for a more decisive situation. Had he been called up...
Anyways, as you can see, it's really cool, and I suggest checking it out. So it's free on YouTube, the Screw Tape Letters by C.S. Lewis Doodle.